heart of America here. And Father, tonight we ask for wisdom, the wisdom to deal with knowledge that we gain. And if we need some more knowledge, we ask for that to be given to us. And we ask for mercy and grace upon ourselves and to give each other mercy and grace as we go through this evening. And we thank you all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
I'd like to remind you all that tomorrow is a good day to go vote, for exercise your rights as a citizen. And tonight, we're going to be pertaining to city business and not any election speeches, I hope. So we'll proceed now with reviewing our city council meeting minutes from October 16th.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to approve the minutes of the October 16th, 2023 City Council meeting.
And I'd like to second that, Mr. Mayor. I'd
Okay.
also like to add on my second that I want to thank the council for approving the changes for the minutes for statements I'd made. I think it made it much clearer for the public to understand what the council was actually dealing with.
Okay, have a motion and a second. Any other questions, discussions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. It moves us down to our appropriation ordinance number 10A dated October 25th of 2023. Council?
I have a question for Erica. I called in this morning about it. Can you explain to us or expand on the utility refund to McDonald's?
Yes, McDonald's apparently underwent a sale. And so when the last bill was issued, a couple days later, we issued a final bill, which also included that other bill. So they paid their last month's bill twice. And so we just returned it to the company that made the payment. And now we are billing the new company.
Okay,
Thank you.
moving forward.
thank you. Any other questions?
I've got a couple of items I'd like some clarification about. Fund number 3200, guest tax payment for $7,528. I noticed that was divided up. Well, there was that amount, and then there was another amount where, no, that was the total amount, but that was divided up into two amounts. One was, I note what number that is, a $7,200 to Alternative Electric. And then there was $328 to EMC insurance companies. And I'm just wondering why both those came out of the fund they came out of.
So the Alternative Electric, that was their proposal to rebuild the electrical lighting system in Garvin Park. And when we presented that proposal that night of, that was the general funding plan to pay for it. It was divided into three different funds to help cover the gap. So guest tax as a tourism project was a portion of it. And then there was two other funds. I can't remember what, I think we probably did capital improvement and maybe just general fund for the other split. So that was based on the proposal that was approved by the city council. Now on EMC, you said 328, that I'm not sure about.
So if it was out of Fund 5, is that what you're talking about, the 05-3200? That is the building,
Frisco
the
Depot.
the Frisco Depot, our property insurance.
I'm sorry, that's what?
The property insurance for the Frisco Depot, we pay for that out of the CTB or guest tax fund as well.
Okay. Is there a reason that's paid out of it rather than
It's the
other
visitor center.
properties in town that we own?
It's the Welcome Center Visitor Center.
Because it's the visitor center?
That-
Okay.
Monthly.
The other item I was wondering is, there was $3,000 paid to Martin's companies, says professional services, AP, I assume that's the airport,
Yes.
from the fund it was paid out of. And Martin's company does what?
Appraisals. So we were doing an appraisal of land out there. One of the things when you're doing leases for commercial properties, and we have prospects that have been inquiring, is best practice from the FAA is to base those leases off of market rates. And in the past, we haven't done that exercise. And so we wanted to reach out to Martin's, get an actual appraisal so we could make some recommendations to the Airport Advisory Board and then ultimately to council on appropriate ground lease rates for construction of future hangars and other projects.
Okay. And with that, that's all the questions I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Anybody else?
I'll make a motion to approve appropriation ordinance number 10A dated October 25th, 2023.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve this appropriation ordinance. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, I have the duty to proclaim December 16th of 2023 as National Wreaths Across America Day. And I'm just going to let you folks read that. Our money is well spent to honor our veterans with the wreaths at Christmas time. And I'd encourage you all to be able to give to that. They're willing to accept lots of donations so that every veteran's grave out there will have a wreath on it. And if you have any questions, just Google that or go down to the museum and talk to Priscilla or Keith Schofield. They'll help you with that. And then our next item is Kansas Water Environment Association Award recognition for Wastewater Division. And I'll turn that over to staff.
Yes, Mayor and Council, I'm just going to turn it straight over to our Public Utilities Director, Tim Johnson, to give you a little bit of background, describe this award that our staff received a month or so back.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'm here this evening to celebrate the good work of the staff in your wastewater division. I'm here to recognize and congratulate the staff, the City of Augusta's wastewater division, specifically Mike Boston, Anthony Cabrales, Jerry Kindler, and Superintendent Shane Nolan.
I'm sorry, Mayor, could he use the microphone, please, so we can hear him?
You
And
keep turning away.
Superintendent Shane Nolan.
Yes, thank you.
Shane and his team have been working to improve the quality of the operations and maintenance of the plant and the collection system, as well as the utilities record keeping for the past 2 years. The governing body has seen the results of some of these efforts as the utility has been aggressive in maintaining and improving those elements of the plant and collection system that have become unreliable or obsolescent. Other less seen efforts have focused on professional development, record keeping, and compliance with state and federal rules and procedures. Examples of these include wastewater technical training and certifications, environmental management certifications, phosphorus measurement and control protocols, stormwater management permitting and procedures, and an emergency management manual. Their efforts have recently been recognized by their industry peers. On August 29th, at the annual Kansas Water Environment Association and American Water Works Association joint conference in Wichita, KWEA awarded the City of Augusta Wastewater Division its 2023 Wastewater Collection System Award in Category 2, that is systems with 125 to 500 miles of collection lines. The Collection Systems Award is presented to a collection system, individual, or municipality for an outstanding and significant contribution in the area of wastewater collection. I won't go deep into the criteria that are included in the award, aside from briefly touching on that it applies to excellence in operations and maintenance, safety and training, improvements, innovative ideas, planning, design, and service. I touched a moment ago on category 2. There are 3 categories of collection systems which receive awards, and they're based strictly on size. In your report, you'll see that the city of Augusta falls into category 2, those cities with 125 to 500 miles of collection lines. The most recent award winner was the city of Ottawa in 2022 and 2021. There was no award given in 2020 in this category. And prior to that, El Dorado was the last city in our area to receive this distinction. I'd like to invite Shane Nolan to come up here, and I will hand to him his recognition. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Shane. Okay. Are there any visitors here tonight that want to have a say about something that's not on the agenda? Okay, we'll go on down to our first item of business and discussion direction regarding a draft ordinance establishing sewer rates. So staff?
Yes, Mayor and Council, I'll kind of set the stage for tonight just by highlighting that your first 2 action items do pertain to ordinances, but they're both being presented as discussion direction items. So it's not intended for you to feel any pressure to approve anything tonight, but it's meant to get these items in front of you to give you a chance to ask questions, provide feedback, input, and if there's any adjustments or things that you would like to see changed, you can suggest that before we bring it back for final adoption. So again, don't feel pressure to take any action. Ask whatever questions you need to ask, and we'll just proceed on those first 2 items in that manner. So the first one here tonight is a discussion direction item regarding our ordinance establishing the sewer rates. Now, if you recall, during our budget work sessions this year, we had a proposal that staff had suggested for your consideration to make a change to the way that we do the sewer rates in order to essentially simplify the billing, maybe simplify the way that the utility bill looks, the number of different charges that you see for sewer fees, and do that by doing something that we've done the last couple of years, actually just combining the wastewater treatment plant fee, or I guess eliminating that wastewater treatment plant fee, but just building it into your regular base rates. So if you recall, the way that your sewer fees are established right now is you essentially have 2 different fees set up. You have what we're calling like the service fee, the usage fee, and then you have the WWTP capital fee. Okay, and they're divided into separate sections of the ordinance. So under the service fee, user fee, customers pay a base rate, and then they pay a per 1,000 gallon charge, depending on the tier structure that's established and their usage. In addition to that, they pay a second and separate fee called WWTP, which also has a tier structure for different levels of usage. And so what we had recommended or proposed was for council to consider redoing the ordinance and essentially eliminating that separation, having one sewer base fee that just covers all of those different things, to simplify the billing, simplify everybody's understanding of it. Now, this is intended to be budget neutral. It's not intended to raise rates. It's not intended to lower rates. It is designed to be as neutral as possible. But in combining them, what we presented to you in the model is there is some variation that occurs at the different tier levels over time, because of the base escalator that was established by city council. So right now, in your sewer fees, there is a base escalator of 3% per year, and that applies only to the base fee on the service charge side. It doesn't apply to the capital fee. It doesn't apply to the per 1,000 gallons usage rate. It just applies to that sewer base. What we did, and I'm going to jump down and show you the model and remind everybody what we were looking at during the budget work sessions. And I apologize, this is going to look tiny for anybody at home. But what we did is we said, if you were to simplify that fee structure, because they're already added together, a customer already pays these charges, and you just make it one single charge on the bill, how does that compare with the base rate escalator process? Because if you add more into the base, that 3% applies to a larger number. So in trying to do this model, there's no way to make it perfectly neutral. Someone's going to see a reduction, someone's going to see an increase, but they are minor. And so what we ended up proposing is we looked at the tiers of the different tiers for how your base rate is set. And we looked at how many customers are in each of those tiers. And so that's what I'm showing up here on the screen. We have roughly 3,600, maybe a little bit more and some change, 3,600 total customers, with the majority of them, you see about 3,550-ish that fall into those first two tiers. That's going to be your residential customers that fall into those first two tiers. The 90 or so customers, maybe close to 100 customers that are in these higher tiers, in all likelihood are probably your bigger commercial users or schools or something like that. So keep that in mind as we go through the rest of this proposal. So in order to make it budget neutral, again, what we notice is when you actually combine those fees, they are obviously really close to neutral the very first year, but then you start seeing variation as that escalator is applied to them over time. So what we suggested is put in a new base escalator that is actually lower to try to make sure that that paces so that we're not raising rates, because the intent was not to raise rates. And folks are not going to be able to see these numbers well, but I think what's important is red and black, if you can see the difference in the colors. Okay, so these different columns, horizontal columns, I'll call them rows if you want to, are the 6 tiers of users. Tier 1 up top, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And as you see from this table, we do not have any users right now being billed that are in that tier 6. So that caps out at tier 5. So you see the rate structure for all of them, but no one is actually paying anything in this tier right now. But in tier 1, which is going to be the 3,067 customers, which is most of your residences, this new proposed rate system actually will give you a slight reduction in the monthly bill compared to the old rate system. And that's just because of the size of the escalator, the way that that gets applied, it ends up being slightly smaller. So what you see in the first year, which would be 2024, if an ordinance is implemented, it's about 6 cents per month less. And then the following year, 12 cents, 18, 19 cents. And so it steps up over time. Okay. So the actual average residential customer would see a reduction by this move, and not even the average, the vast majority of residential customers, almost 3,100 people, will see a reduction of a small amount to their bill. But then the way that the model makes it budget neutral is it recoups that rough equivalent from the other higher level tiers. So tier 2, you can see a variation. It will be about 17 cents more expensive for the 486 customers in tier 2. And then again, that gradually grows a little bit over time. And 7 years down the line, you can see there's about $1 a month difference. And then as you get down in the tiers 3 through 5, which is primarily the business customers, I'm going to say the commercial customers or the large customers like schools, there is a bit more of a variation, but we tried to make them as close as possible. Now, down at the bottom, I will zoom in so everybody can see this. It's the estimated budget impact from the model. So when you add up the projected loss that we'll have from the tier 1 customer and the slight gains you will see on the other tiers, the end result in the first year is about $398 more than we would have received under the old rate ordinance. In the second year, it's about 586, 552, 284. And then you can see as it gets cheaper and cheaper for the residential customers, the city actually starts making less money than it did under the old system. So this is a 7-year model. You may have to look at this around that time period and decide if you want to continue on that track or not, or reevaluate the rates to kind of recenter them to be neutral again, because at some point the city does start losing more and more, but that'll be up to those councils to decide. This just gives you a rough projection showing that, again, our intent was not to make money. Our intent was to try to simplify that process. But then also, if you recall, when we modified our budget to start charging the wastewater plant for its utility usage, we had to figure out which funds we were going to use to cover those actual fees when we were billing it for water and billing it for electric. Well, initially we were looking at putting it in that Fund 49, which is the capital fee fund. But the issue is that has a restricted use by ordinance, that when we looked at that, it didn't seem like that was an appropriate use of those funds. And so we had to absorb it in the service fees. Well, the problem is the service fees didn't have that type of balance to try to do true cost accounting and pay for the utility. So in the past couple of years, what council has done at staff's recommendation was lowered the wastewater treatment plant fee by $5 and then raised the base service charge by $5. So again, neutral for customers, but it gets the money in the appropriate fund so you can make the payments to the other utilities. This just takes that logic to its conclusion and says, just make it one fee. You have all of the money in now 2 funds instead of 3 different budget funds. You have it in an operating fund and then a capital reserve fund. So that was some of the stuff we discussed in the work sessions. The other piece of it was to simplify the budgets because, as I just said, you have 3 funds right now that cover the sewer utility. 2 of them have about 80-90% overlap in stuff that you can fund out of them. Okay, so this is just saying simplify that structure, simplify the budget, simplify the bill, and so all people see now is their sewer base charge. All on one thing, their base charge and then their per 1,000 gallons. So that was the model that we discussed in the summer back in June, July. So I'm just reminding you of that. And so now what you have is a draft ordinance that essentially implements that model. And so I'm going to pull up our current ordinance just to show you those differences real quick. So here is the current ordinance, and as you can see, it establishes a base rate, and then it has a per 1,000 gallon charge, and then it has an entire separate section down below for the sewer capital fee where it applies a charge at these different tiers, okay? So what our new proposal essentially does is it keeps these same tiers, but then takes the dollar amount and adds it to that base fee all as one thing. Okay. So instead of a $21 charge and then a $5 charge, now you're just 26. That's how the new ordinance is established. So that's what you'll see on here. So you still have the 6 tiers, but now you just have one number that covers all of that. And then you have the same rates down below for the per 1,000 gallon charge. And then the base rate escalator, which was 3% historically, has been reduced down to 2.23%. And that was the number we calculated to achieve that budget neutral model. So that's a refresher. We talked about that, maybe not in that level of detail when we initially proposed it, but I'm going to stop there and just open it up for questions, and then we can take that conversation wherever you want. Again, this is a draft. If you want to look at something different, we can. But I just wanted to make sure to cover the basics of what you had talked about over the summer and set the stage for you to have this conversation tonight. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to council and see if you have any questions.
I have a question about the 2.23% escalator. Do you feel comfortable that'll keep up with inflation for the costs that we will incur for repairs down there?
I think, as I said, when we were previously talking about the other escalators and for the other utilities, that the only one that probably really keeps up with inflation is the solid waste one, because it's actually a true 3% increase, and then inflation hovers anywhere between 2 and 4% if you look at it historically. For the water and wastewater utilities, I don't think it helps you keep up with inflation, but it probably doesn't meet inflation because it only applies to a portion of the bill. It only applied historically to the base rate, but not to the capital fee and the other usage component. So, I mean, if it's a question of do I think consumer price index is going to be 2.23% or lower in the future, my guess would be not. Okay. But I'm not going to advocate unless we have a different need or a different project or something that we want to pursue, that we need to be more aggressive than that and go after it. So right now, we have paid off the debt on the wastewater plant, but you probably still have tens of millions of dollars in outstanding need in the sewer collection system itself, the pipes that are underground. We've done one basin so far. The next basin, C basin, is 3 times larger than that one, and estimates have been as high as $10 to $14 million to completely reline that or replace some of those lines. So you are still going to need a significant amount of money. This isn't high enough to do that. The 3% wasn't high enough to do it. Like you just don't charge enough to replace something of that scale with cash. You're going to have to finance them in some way. Now, that being said, we do have our resources lined up and the budget lined up where we should be able to start making progress on those sort of projects. It may be, a $4 million or a $3 million project, and then we utilize the cash generated by these funds to help us pay the debt. But it's never going to pay for and fix everything outstanding at this level. And I don't know that you would want to set a rate right now to try to fix all of that at once. No. I think that's an incremental thing over time.
Josh, on the water usage, it's calculated over an average of the winter months. Would you remind us what are the winter months?
So they're the bills for January, February, and March, which is actually usage for December, part of December. It depends on when the billing falls, but generally it's December, January, and February's usage. Okay. And we make the change April 1st.
Okay.
And I'd like to speak to the reason we have the escalator, because I pushed for this years ago, because we would come up, we would go along for 10 years and never raise the rate. And then all of a sudden, instead of a 2 or 3 cent increase or a dollar increase a month. We were looking at $5 to $10 a month increase, which is a big shock to the customers. And so I pressed for this escalator so that we would keep a little bit of an increase every year, so it wouldn't surprise people, it wouldn't hurt them bad, and yet it would still keep some of the funds in the black, so we didn't go in the red. And that was my thought all along, and we convinced the rest of the council to vote on that years ago. That's where that came from. And then secondly, remember that this is a user fee. This isn't a tax. This is a user fee. You're paying for something that you get to use. And we have to keep that system functional, just so you can use it. And secondly, so we don't get some fine from a federal agency or a state agency for not meeting the standards. So that's the reasoning of the escalator at this point.
So to the question that you asked, Mayor, about the escalator. So this is the model that we had set up. And again, the reason I set these models up is so you guys can explore different options. And what I'm going to show you here is just if you made no change to that escalator, this is not a budget neutral action. If you make no change to that escalator, it raises a significant amount more revenue per year than what we're currently taking in. And so I don't advocate for that unless you have specific goals or a specific project or something you want to target and you think that that's necessary. And so you can gradually start stepping this down and you see what happens to the model. And so we stepped it all the way down to that rate. And that was the one that was closest to budget neutral. And you can see that over 7 years, it's about $592 total across all customers in change. So that's how we arrived at it, because we set the goal as budget neutral.
Right.
We had no other reasons that we were looking at it or nothing in mind when we were setting that other than trying to get close to budget neutral. But it's not perfect because you now have a different base amount that escalator is being applied to. And so you get a bit of variation to the tiers. But I think what we liked when we looked at it in the summer was 3,100 customers getting a reduction.
Yeah.
And so the other thing I will throw out, I guess some of the logic for having that slight reduction on your residential customers and then making some of that back on your higher end customers. I'm going to show you just some wastewater rate comparisons, how we compare to other cities. This is the REAP region. So they haven't done an updated analysis like this. REAP used to do these on an annual basis, and it was fantastic to have that data. They have not done this since like 2016, 2017. So this is going to be a little bit older data, but what I tried to do is show you, okay, Augusta 2024, this is the new proposed rate structure. For the other cities that are highlighted yellow, those numbers should be updated through 2021. And then for the other cities that are still white, they're updated as of the REAP study, which is 2016, 2017. And so this shows historically, we were under on the high end. Actually, we were under kind of across the board, but we were significantly more under on the high end. If you carry this out, the other cities have significantly higher rates for their higher level users. So this data is 5 or 6 years old. My presumption is a number of these cities have probably made adjustments, and generally your adjustments don't go down, they go up. So comparing our 2024 data to either other cities' 2021 or 2016, 2017 data, we are below average for the 3,000 gallon level of usage, for the 5,000, for the 6,000, for the 10,000, and then we jump up right around average at 15,000. So I presume that you're staying just right in the mix with all of these other cities, even after, actually, you're not even making an adjustment. This is how you compare currently, I guess. You're just, now you have a single fee that does that comparison. So for folks that ask, how do we compare to other cities? Historically, your lower tiers have been lower than the REAP average, and they still remain that way in this situation. And you get close to average towards the higher end.
Any other thoughts, questions?
Josh, I'll make a comment. You pretty much presented this exact same proposal back this summer, and I liked it then, and I still like it now. I don't really see anything basically I would change in it.
I have a question about the reserve revenue. Can you remind me where that comes from?
So you have 3 budget funds. One of them is, I'm going to call the operating fund. That's the main operation that pays for people. So that main operating fund, the revenue comes from your base charge and your per 1,000 gallon charge. Okay. And then that's fund 50. Sorry, 50. Then you have fund 49, which is the sewer capital fee. The revenue comes from the sewer capital fee. Then you have Fund 47, which is the reserve in the middle. And the reserve has money transferred from both of those other 2 funds to go into that reserve simply to build the reserve. So you have a transfer budgeted from Fund 49 to go into the reserve. You have transfer budgeted from Fund 50, depending on which one has money that year. So again, that's where the overlap occurs in those funds. And so when I was looking at it and just seeing that level of overlap, my question is, why does it have to be that complicated? So the thought is you simplify it. You have one operating fund, one reserve fund for capital equipment and capital projects. And then the Fund 49 goes away in the future. That's how it's set up right now.
Well,
So the revenue to the reserve only comes from transfers from those other 2 funds.
looking at the budget summary that was in this packet, it looks like the revenue for 2022 was a total of 25,000. And actual for 2022 was 25,000, but this year budgeted and actual is 150,000.
Yes.
So how much money do we actually have in that reserve fund? I mean, my point is, I think our utilities need to be self-sufficient, and I echo the mayor's concerns about keeping up with stuff. We just injected several $1 million into our electric fund, and I don't want to get to the point where we have to do this with wastewater also.
So there's layers to that question. I'm trying to figure out how to unpack that. So I guess what I'm trying to reiterate in the model is that your end position after 7 years is virtually no different than where you're at now. $592 difference. So even with that lower escalator, because that escalator is technically being applied to a higher base fee, it generates close to the same amount of actual dollars. So if you want to ask a question of, do we have sewer needs that we aren't able to fulfill or meet with our current budget, then that's a different sort of question, in which case you would want to have a conversation about tying rates to a proposed project or something that you're trying to do. Right now, you have enough money in the wastewater fund where you're not at risk of having to raise a rate just to cover a basic operating cost. Really, I think where you're at is how aggressive do you want to be on projects? That's how I would summarize your position right now. You are very healthy on operating costs. If you want to do a $10 million sewer basin and you want to pay for that aggressively, you need more than this. If you want to keep up with our packaging the way that we've done it and maybe do some piecemeal projects, go after some grants and other things like that, then this is more than sufficient to operate at that level. So to me, what you're asking is maybe there's some different questions there. It shouldn't change our operating position based on the way we function today. If you want to be more aggressive with projects, then that's a different conversation. That's the way I would describe it.
Okay, I guess what I'm not grasping is by combining these two funds into one, how does that affect our reserve fund?
It really won't. It just, instead of two different funds transferring into that one, you will just have one fund transferring into it.
And how do we decide how much goes into that reserve fund?
That's what you guys decide each year in the budget process. So staff has a recommended budget that we prepare, and normally it's based on, have we covered our operating costs in the operating fund? And if there's any extra, you move it to the reserve fund. So it's not a fixed number. It's based on availability of cash.
Okay.
And so that's not going to change. Council still has control over that. It's just, instead of being able to move from two different funds, you just have an operating fund and a reserve fund.
There's an amount on the billing right now for $5. And what fund does that go into?
That's the wastewater he's talking about.
Is that,
Isn't that for wastewater?
if it says WWTP fee next to it, that goes into Fund 49, the sewer capital fund.
Yes, that goes in the capital. And that $5 years ago was placed on the billing because the citizens were told in order to build a new sewer plant, we were going to issue bonds. And to show the amount to pay for the bonds, we were going to be assessed $5. And when the bonds were paid, that amount would go away. But we've kept that on there. And I understand what you're saying about needing reserve funds, but I'm also looking at the fact that when we tell the public something's going to happen, we need to explain to them very carefully why they're still paying that $5 if the bonds have been paid.
So I went through that history because that was put in place in the early 2000s, like 2001 or so. And I have not found anything in any of the communications, the memos, the minutes from that time period indicating that it was ever going to end. There's nothing in the ordinance itself about it ending. I don't know what the nature of the communications were at that time. All I can find is the records that we have. I don't know what the communications were. So that was part of the basis of it. And if you look at the ordinance right now, it's actually broader than that too. So it says shall pay monthly sewer capital fee that is used toward the retirement of debt, annual costs related to inflow and infiltration maintenance and repairs to the sewer collection system. So inflow and infiltration is rain getting into your sewers. So fixing clay tile pipes, those sort of things. Sewer collection equipment, and for a wastewater system capital reserve. So the debt was one of the four things listed. And this was all done by ordinance. The minutes I found, the staff report, they don't go into enough detail to indicate that it's going to end, but I'm not saying the communications didn't happen. I'm just saying I can't speak to them.
Okay.
I know that, Josh, we regularly get that question in the utility office. And since I've been here since 2006, we've always told them that fee, because we've had people say that fee will go away when that's paid off. And we've always told them that is not the case, that's not a
Well,
guarantee.
see, that's what everyone
They assumed
suggests to
that.
me, and the people had to get that idea from someplace. I'm sure they just didn't make it up on their own.
It
So
was
that's why I'm
added.
inquiring about it now, because it does specify as a separate fee on the billing, like at some point it will go away. It's not like a base fee or any other cost on there that's based on usage and so forth. It's just a flat amount. And my general concept from individuals is that was supposed to end at some time. So I was just going to ask the question, if that were to end and we're now wanting to roll it into another kind of just a base fee, have we not told people the truth? But I guess if we go back in the documents, it says it was never going to end. I'm not quite sure where everyone got that
Yeah,
idea.
and I'll send you what I was able to find.
Okay.
I found some staff reports. I found some other stuff like that from when the ordinance was first introduced. And the only wording I saw was going to be in place for a long time.
Was
It is
there any
like
wording
that.
prior to that date when the sewer plant was built?
I went back, so the documents that I can readily search go back through 1998. And so this ordinance was put in place in '01. I think the plant came maybe a year or so after that, year or two.
Plant came
Must be.
online 2001 or 2002 at the latest.
Okay.
You
So
were on the council then,
Well,
I believe.
and I don't know, I kind of had that idea too. So you don't remember anything about the fee to pay the bonds?
And and when it was probably first talked about was probably just before the flood in 98. So there could have been,
Yeah.
could have been communication lost.
Sure.
Because of all the stuff we had to deal with.
I mean,
And I wasn't on the council in 98. Yeah.
Yeah, the ordinance, the law itself does reference the retirement of debt, but then it also references a bunch of other ongoing costs and the capital reserve as well. And so, again, I was looking specifically to that question, if I could find anything indicating that that's what the communication was, or that's how it was passed, but I couldn't find it in those records. And I'll share with you guys what I was able to find.
I mean, if it were just going to be a continuing cost, why wasn't it made part of the base fee?
It's a good question. Honestly, that's probably how I would have done it. And the reason I say that, if you take out those tiers here, you are a fraction of average.
Mhm.
So your fees would amount to nothing compared to these other cities. So whenever we've, historically, when we had to submit to REAP, we always combined them because our numbers look ridiculous
Right.
next to others.
Okay.
Again, I wish I could speak to that better, but I was not able to find anything in that record that showed it was communicated that way.
And I would agree with Councilman Huddleston. I've heard that off and on through the years, but I don't ever remember seeing it in writing. And you didn't find it in writing, so.
Yeah, I mean, for like sales tax, I mean, we have other things that are set up that way. This was just passed by an ordinance, and I couldn't find anything else other than the staff report itself.
Anybody else have any ideas on it? What do you think you'll bring this back?
I'll just bring it to the next meeting. I mean, it gives a chance for the public to hear it if they have any other questions or want to raise concerns to you guys. You can, they got a couple of weeks, they can do that before you take any official vote on it. So I'll just bring it
And the
back at
numbers
next
you were
meeting.
saying that were hard to read, they can find all that in the packet.
Yeah,
online,
if
so
you,
I make that clear.
Let's show them where it is real quick. If you go back, so all of our meeting packets, including the work sessions, are published on our website in the agendas and minutes section. And I think it's either work session number 2 or 3. Give me 1 second. Yeah, so it was work session number 2, dated June 8th, 2023. So if you go look up budget work session number 2, you can read that packet. And you jump down to the wastewater section that explains those 3 funds. And you will see this proposal right here. City manager proposal eliminating wastewater treatment fund 49, and then the numbers for that model are right there in that staff report.
Perfect.
Okay, that's all I had on that item, Mayor and Council.
Okay. Let's move down to item 2, discussion direction regarding draft of the common consumption ordinance for the Red Brick Social District. Staff?
Yes, Mayor and Council, this one, it has been council has raised questions the last couple meetings where this ordinance has been. And so I just want to give you some background, what I've been working on. And in all honesty, it really boils down to the insurance. And we've been working with our broker, working with our carrier. And when I bring the ordinance to you, I want to be able to answer any questions that you have regarding liability, regarding risk management, regarding what the actual requirements or recommendations are from our carrier. And that's been going back and forth and up and down a little bit. And so I want to give you a little bit of background on that, but then also show you all of the other provisions regarding the common consumption area and see if you have any questions, comments, thoughts on that while we're still resolving the insurance component. So what we'll start with is for anybody at home listening or in the audience that was not here a couple months back, there was a presentation made by Go Augusta based on information that I think had come out of Main Street America that was looking at these types of open container or common consumption, whatever you want to call them. They have different names in different states, but essentially entertainment or social districts as a way of encouraging activity in your traditional main streets and downtowns. And there's about, I think, I counted 30 to 40 different cities in Georgia that were listed on that presentation that had done such a move in their community. So they're the ones that have been around longer, going back 6-7 years, that you can look at and draw some conclusions from. This is a new thing in Kansas. And so you're still kind of on the leading edge of that. Common consumption areas have existed for a while, but the way that the statute was drafted, they were done in kind of limited settings. So you could set up like a fenced off barrier in a square in the downtown that would have access points and people could control it and by special event permit essentially have consumption on the sidewalks or streets if it was closed for something like that. A change happened in July of this year where the legislature added some language that seemed to kind of open up the possibilities by not having that be a forced street closure or a hard barrier, but you could have other forms of demarcation showing what the district is, what it looks like. So Go Augusta got together and did a lot of research on this issue and put together a proposal to essentially designate the Main Street downtown area as a common consumption area. What that would mean is any businesses that are licensees, so we get our terminology right. The common consumption area is the public space. The licensee is an adjoining business that has by permit been granted the right to allow alcohol to leave their premises to go into the common consumption area. Okay. This proposal would essentially designate the Main Street area as the common consumption area. So you wouldn't have a square or a fenced off area. You would have the Main Street, but then the Main Street edges, the boundaries of that area would be designated with signage, with markings on the pavement, markings on the sidewalk showing when you're in the area versus when you're not. And what it would allow, again, participating licensees to allow alcohol to leave their premises, go into the common consumption area. And if you want Go Augusta to speak more to the reasoning and ideas behind it, then we do have Jamie Chapin here. And just recall from her presentation that the observation in the communities in Georgia that had done it was that it really increased economic activity in their downtown. And it just allows folks to try to move between businesses and just encourage that activity on the street. So as you can imagine, though, that when you're dealing with alcohol, that there's going to be concerns that you don't want that to be a total free-for-all for how that works. And so the way that the statute is written, there are a bunch of limitations for how the alcohol consumption can occur. So for instance, it has to be limited to a certain type of cup. The cup has to be traceable back to the originating business. In our ordinance, the way that it's drafted, the cup is single serve. It's not able to be refilled. You're not able to walk out with 5 or 6 in your hands. It is one beverage that you're leaving a business with, that you're consuming as you're walking towards a boutique or something else you can shop at, or down to the movie theater. You're just allowed to leave with it. So it's not meant to be a free-for-all in that way. And the cups have the markings because according to ABC, which handles the liquor licenses, the liability follows the cup. So the originating business still has liability and responsibility for that alcohol. But when they cross the barrier of those premises, enter a common consumption area, there's some changes that occur with that, but you can still tie it back to the originating business to make sure that they're acting responsibly. So that's the basic premise of the common consumption. Now, what I want to do is walk you through the various provisions that are in this ordinance, and we can talk about those. I did have a joint meeting with Chief Ackerman to talk about it from a public safety perspective, and with Jamie Chapin as well. And I know that there were other folks, downtown business owners, that have been involved in the conversation at different levels kind of throughout the process. So let us start with the first couple of sections. These are just adding in parentheses a reference to a brand new article that we've created. So you do have ordinances prohibiting consumption on public property, except in the Frisco Depot, which you have an exception for. So this adds an Article 8, which is the common consumption area. So in these first two sections, you're simply adding the reference to Chapter 3, Article 8. The other language has not changed. Now you come down to Article 8. This is where the new addition to your law has some changes. So first, the first couple of sections A, B, and C have to do with the creation of the common consumption area. So this designates the Main Street area, refers to the common consumption as the Red Brick Social District. And the boundaries are the same as Main Street, except we had talked about placing the signage at the end of the buildings before the alleyways, so as not to encourage people to leave and go walking down the alleyways with their alcohol. Stop them before they reach the parking lots, before they've gone down the alleyways. So that's the only slight difference between the Main Street area and this is I think the Main Street is defined as the center line or something like that. So slight variation. The boundaries will need to have signage and demarcation. My hope is when we actually present the ordinance to you for adoption, that we can have some samples. I did find some really good examples at the City of Independence, who has already done this, prepared. And so I'm hoping that we can have some at least preliminary concepts to show you what that signage demarcation would look like. There is an hours limitation as well as a days limitation. So this is not at all times. Initially for the rollout of what we're going to call a pilot project, it was identified Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, which we hope are the high shopping days for the downtown area. It designates time frame between 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. The cutoff was 10 p.m. and not later, because of feedback from public safety department that the thought was you go later into the night, that's the type of alcohol activity. Just based on experience, we generally don't want to be encouraging out on the streets. That's the late night bar drinking, that sort of thing. If this is intended to be an attraction for business activity, then it should really be limited to the times that those retail businesses or the movie theater or something are more likely to be open. So it doesn't need to be open all hours of the night. So Thursday through Saturday, 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. And in each case, there's a caveat that unless the council has approved some other type of special event permit that allows you to have a different set of circumstances than that. All right, so after the first section, which establishes the area, we have the rules of conduct. So starting with sales condition, that's for possession, consumption of alcoholic liquor and cereal malt beverage only. The sales must occur in the licensee building. The licensees are the businesses that are adjoining the common consumption area that have been permitted to allow alcohol to leave. So if they have not been permitted, then you do not get to freely participate and allow folks to leave your establishment. Sales of alcohol in the common consumption area is also not what this is about. It is limited to consumption. So unless you have a caterer's license or a special event permit where the council has approved it or the city is actually doing the sales, sales are not occurring on the street. They're occurring in the adjoining businesses, and then consumption is occurring in the public area. The consumption areas, we did see this in a number of other ordinances, and we're talking through the logic of it, and it made sense to us to include this language as well, that the common consumption area includes the pedestrian infrastructure, which is the sidewalks and the crosswalks, but it's not intended for the street itself to be an open consumption area unless the council has actually authorized the closure of the street to vehicular traffic. We are not trying to encourage people to be wandering up and down the street consuming alcohol while vehicles are moving around them. So under normal circumstances, allows them to move in the crosswalks, allows them to move along the sidewalks, but not wander down the street with alcohol unless you have closed the street to vehicular traffic. And again, that's at the approval of the governing body. The ordinance prohibits purchases and consumption from alcoholic liquor purchased outside of the CCA, unless, again, the council has done some sort of special event permit and approved that to occur. But under normal circumstances, your alcohol will originate in the licensees that are participating. Removal of the purchases, so no open container is allowed to be removed from the boundaries. That should go without saying. That's what the signage and demarcation on the sidewalks and markings would be showing where the edge of those boundaries are. And later in the ordinance, you will see that we're going to require each of the licensees that are participating to have some signage posted on their exit door. So as someone is leaving, they're aware that if they're carrying alcohol, they're entering the common consumption area, and have a brief overview of what those rules and regulations are. Item E places a limit of one person, one drink. Again, you're not going to be able to walk out with both arms full of cups. Each person is able to leave with one 16-ounce cup. And again, that cup will be logoed and tied back to the originating licensee, cannot be refilled either by the licensee or any other business participating. It is a single serve cup. That way it's much easier to track the origination, or at least discourage it from constantly being refilled or other businesses getting confused on the origin of the alcohol. So that cup will have a logo and identifying marks. The establishments are limiting to one drink, as plastic or paper cups shall be single serve. Conduct, this is just a general statement. So rather than creating new language regarding just general public intoxication or applicability of like disorderly conduct or statutes, it just says that while in the CCA, you will follow all existing laws of the city. So we're not creating any new language. That stuff already exists. It's just you have permission to drink alcohol. It changes nothing else about if you're acting reckless. All of those other laws still apply. And then we get to section G, and this is the section that specifically applies to the licensed premises. They are not able to participate in the common consumption area unless they have filled out the forms and have been granted authority by the Kansas Alcohol and Beverage Control Director. So there is a standard form that office utilizes for people to fill in and participate. So we don't even make that determination. The state will determine based on this process whether they're allowed to participate or not. Licensee, again, reiterating they're only allowed to let their patrons leave with one alcoholic liquor drink. There is a provision in the ordinance. So this is not a normal circumstance, but there is a provision in the ordinance and in the state statute that says that council can essentially designate an area within the common consumption area that is non-contiguous, but a licensee may be able to go to that non-contiguous area and actually serve within the CCA. That is not a normal circumstance, but if you choose to approve that, let's say Shane's or Bricks or something wants to actually serve out on the street, you do actually have the ability under the statute to do that. So this just recognizes what the statute allows, but doesn't force you to do anything. It is at your discretion as the CCA permit holder. When you see permit holder, that's the city.
You do that, Josh, how do you handle the cups and the signage to inform the purchaser?
Yeah. So again, it's not a normal circumstance. So those are good questions to ask. If you're going to allow it, how do you have those sort of protections? So you can make them bring their cups with them. You can make them have some sort of signage. So you have total control over that. I don't know the logistics of it. It does get harder when it's not there brick and mortar, but you have the ability to have all those requirements or not allow it at all. That's your option. So the compliance with applicable laws, this is where I have a back and forth going on with our insurance carrier right now. So what's been delaying this to this point is our insurance carrier hasn't received a lot of questions from cities about this, and said that we're essentially the first to ask some of these questions. And so they had recommendations on what we should do with insurance. And that would be impose requirements for the businesses to have liquor liability coverage, to have general liability coverage, for the city to be named as an additional insured on those policies, to have hold harmless agreement and some other language. And what I had shared with them is that the statute itself says that the licensee's liability exists within the licensed premises. And then it says any violations of the common consumption area restrictions fall back on the permit holder, which with us, this is that language, says each licensee shall be liable for violations governing sale and consumption that occurs in the licensee's premises. But it says the common consumption permit holder is responsible for violations. So the question I had to insurance is, are you requiring us to require something of businesses, one, that the state does not require? So I checked with ABC, which governs the alcohol licensing, and verified that if you are serving alcohol in the state of Kansas, the state of Kansas as a requirement for their permit or their licensing does not force you to have liquor liability insurance. Yet our insurance company initially was saying that you should probably require that they have it. So what I was pointing out to them is, you're forcing us to require something of the businesses that the state doesn't even require to license them to start with. I think that's important to parse out and say, I guess we can have that requirement, but I think that if you do, in some circumstances, you're probably going to make this costly and onerous enough that there's probably some businesses that might not participate. My hope would be, if you're serving alcohol, you want to protect yourself and you have coverage. But I think when I did some looking online, like 50% of businesses across the country that serve alcohol don't have liquor liability insurance. So you're going to have to make some decisions if that you're going to have that sort of requirement. In our subsequent conversations, it seems like they may be backing off of that a little bit once I showed them what the law said, but I don't consider that final yet. And so I don't want to recommend something to you that I don't feel like I've got a final answer from the insurance carrier yet. Yes, sir.
Well, I was just going to mention, when you said you looked around the country, and that concerns me, because many of the towns that were presented to us by Augusta look like they're in Georgia. Now, I'm not familiar with Georgia state law.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not familiar with the ordinances that those towns have. And plus, I know nothing about those towns, their demographics and what they got going on. So I don't even know why we're using those as comparisons, other than it looks like they've sold a lot of liquor. So I don't have anything to base a comparison on, but as you were talking, you're mentioning independence.
Mm-hmm.
Independence isn't concerned about insurance laws?
It's a complicated question.
Okay,
So,
well, that's what I'm getting at.
yes,
Because we're trying to be concerned about it, but
exactly.
others who do
Yes.
this are not concerned about it. So should we be concerned or not concerned?
Yeah. I don't have a good answer for you yet. And But I did want to at least get this in front of you to explain what's been holding it up and let you see some of that and hear some of the explanations. So Independence, Kansas is the only one that I can tell that has done is this exact thing. The others may have some variations of this, but a lot of other cities I think are still working under some of those older restrictive statutes with those smaller controlled areas and like haven't designated their downtown in this way. But that's, I think, why the Georgia example is coming up, because that's essentially the exact model that this is, where you have like broader districts as opposed to a single like parking lot or beer garden type thing. So I think that's why that example is raised. Now you guys have to figure out your comfort level with liability and responsibility, which is why I'm trying to get as much clarity as possible from the insurance company. And I don't feel like I have it fully yet.
Well, I'm trying to figure this out too. And of course, I mentioned I'm not familiar with Georgia. And if there are other towns across the United States, I'd kind of like to know about those that are doing this. The only ones I'm familiar with is places I've been, like Las Vegas, and, Nevada, and down in Louisiana.
So what I
And those are entirely different atmospheres than I want to develop, in my opinion, than in Augusta. So I'm struggling with where we're headed and what these others are doing, and if we're trying to be like others. And I'm just trying to understand the purpose of doing this, because I know also there's been a lot of time spent in activities for the downtown area where we're talking about family oriented. And maybe Go Augusta can address this after a bit, but we spent marketing parades and activity for kids. We have Bugs Bunny. We have other activities. We have the trick or treat, and it looks like the time frame for this is the time frame that those activities are going to be taking place also in the same district. So I'm not sure if we're changing marketing patterns about what we want Augusta to be to something different than what has always been indicated to me we want it to be. So.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the nature of the policy conversation for you all to decide as a governing body. And I think Go Augusta, when they did their presentation, explained where it was coming from as an economic development driver. And that was based on what had been observed in those other places. And so if you guys want to have that conversation with them, I'm going to certainly let you have that conversation. So I'm not advocating on the policy of it per se. I'm speaking to the direction I was provided to craft the ordinance. I'm walking you through how it was being crafted, but I think those are good questions for you guys to get resolution to when you make your vote. And that's what you have to decide, is what is the direction for the downtown area that you want to go. So I referenced a little bit earlier the signage requirement. So here's an example. This is the signage that would be required to be posted in the business at the exit doors. And I'm not going to read through that. It just basically says you're going into a common consumption area. Here's the rules. And you can change that wording up to make it look however you want. And then this is the part, again, I think is hinging on what our insurance carrier recommends. So it does seem like at least the local folks have started backing off of some of the requirements they were initially proposing, but they haven't got that answer from corporate yet. And so to your question, EMC covers a lot of municipalities. But when I contacted them, what I was told was, well, you're the first one to ask us. And so in some respects, they are learning a little bit too as we go. But what surprises me is these do exist all over the state, common consumption areas, just maybe not as entire main streets. So the common consumption stuff's been around for a while, but it's always been much more restrictive. So I don't know if the liability changes significantly or not. That's for the carrier to weigh in on. And as soon as I get an answer, I will share with you. So the way that I treat it in the ordinance is have this provision in there that says essentially what state statute says, that the licensee is responsible on the premises but the licensee shall provide any insurance coverage or proof of coverage as may be required by the governing body. So it leaves it open-ended for you to establish standards. I just don't know what the standards are going to be yet. And that's the ordinance. So I'm going to stop right there. And obviously Jamie's been sitting patiently. I'll turn it over to you guys. You can ask some of those questions about the origin of, where we're going. And then we can also talk specifics of how the ordinance is drafted right now as well. So I'll turn it over to you for that conversation.
Well, Jamie, let's let you hear from you.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor, Council, and staff. This was something that there is a surge going. Since 2020, we've had over 40 new businesses in our downtown. That's something that hasn't happened in many years before. We talk a lot about economic development, and Go Augusta, we look at it as what can we do? What do we have in front of us that we can do something with? We don't have the land that we can deal with. Those are some of the things we can't do. So what can we do to push Augusta forward? We often talk about, keeping things the way they should be, but you know what? We've got to move forward or else we are going to die. And I've heard that from people before. It's like, oh, Augusta's dying. It's not. Guess what? We really aren't. This is a project to help kind of put us in the first position. This is something to bring us out of the Stone Age and bring us into, this is how things work nowadays. And let's have the opportunity to be on the forefront of something instead of catching up with it 20 years from now. This isn't something that, and we use Georgia. I'll specifically say Councilman Huddleston, I did give demographics, population, Main Street area locations in the presentation that I did to you. The purpose of this is to support the outside people going to your downtown, people spending time in your community. We're marketing it as a destination. We want people from Wichita to come here because guess what? You can't do this in Wichita. There are 28 other communities in Kansas right now that are doing this as well. The only difference is the statute has changed so that you do not have to block the streets now. That is the only thing that's changed with it. The goal of this isn't for people to be walking around drunk. This is for people like me who, oh, guess what? I'm going to go have dinner. Oh, I'm going to walk down to the movie. I'm going to go shop at Tanya's. We have this specifically for different events that we want to do. We want to have sip-and shops. We want to have women's evenings out. We want to have guys' evenings out. We want to be able to promote the community and have people, not just from our community, but from other communities come and say, wow, we want to spend our time and money here. We talk a lot about taxes, but this is a perfect way to get people into spending the money in our community, not just our community members. So when you look at this, this is not for people to come down and drink. That was never the purpose of it. And that's why we've had these meetings to be able to go over specific things so that people know this isn't the purpose of it. The purpose is come out and explore and stay in our city and be something different that you haven't seen, because we have a great opportunity with the proximity to Wichita. I don't see it as a problem. I see it as a great opportunity, but we need to capitalize on that. So this is a way for us to be able to kind of get out ahead of things and look like, oh, hey, we're the first. Independence Main Street used all of my research for their ordinance, and they're up and going at this time. The insurance, I appreciate Josh doing his due diligence to make sure we are doing it the right way and have it covered. That's very important. So you know what? If it takes a little more time, it does. But we want to do it the right way. We don't want it to be a mess. But I also don't want to overthink everything to where, well, this could possibly maybe happen someday, because who knows? But if we don't try, what are we going to do? We just sit back and let things continue on the way they are? Or do we want to step up and make the community what we want to make it and get those people involved? And I'm happy to answer any questions as well. I have done a lot of research on this. I know I'm scary.
No, I think you explained it well. I think people think alcohol and you think a bunch of drunks and sloppy and all that. You can look at this as people walking around with a glass of wine in their cup, going from shop to shop, a craft beer, a regular beer. One of the places we went on a travel, they had like a book club outside, and they were sitting there reading their book club talk with a glass of wine. This isn't just a bunch of drunks. I think the best part is shutting it down at 10 o'clock. Because anything after 10, people are, they're going to start having more. I like the 10 o'clock shutdown. I don't think this changes the Bugs Bunny Club and all that, by no means. If it gets that bad, you shut it off around those things then. Mm-hmm. You say if they're going to have something downtown, no drinking, shut it off for that day. But I don't think it's going to get carried away. And if it does, we shut it off. We can turn it on, we can shut it off.
And so one detail that I haven't shared with council yet is it's always kind of going to be a 1-year pilot at a time. So you are passing an ordinance, but the state's permit only lasts for a year. So you're going to have to keep cycling that and renewing it each year if it's going to continue.
Go Augusta did note in our last presentation that we want to make sure this is successful, so we have no problem putting out videos of what can happen. We're going to train each of the facilities on what their responsibilities are, so that each of them know what this is. We've already spoken a lot with them to get their feelings and feedback on this already. We did a survey of all of the businesses downtown, and we didn't have one that wasn't interested in participating. So like you said, it's something that, we've got to try. And most of the time when you put something out there, you have all these fears of what's going to happen. And most of the time they never happen. And that's what I want to see, because I think people will do the right thing. I've seen a lot of the people in this community, and most of them will always do the right thing.
Who will pay
The
for
car
all
show's
the
a prime
signage
example.
and the demarcation lines and so forth?
I'm sorry?
Who will pay for all the
Go Augusta.
signage
As
required and all the demarcation?
we
lines.
stated, Go Augusta will be funding that.
Okay, on a permanent basis?
Yes.
So we don't permit them. Are we gonna have a copy of who's permitted and somewhere? Is it gonna be posted on their building or?
Yeah. So, basically all those things you just said. I think they would have an indicator of which businesses are participating. They would have the signage with the rules and regs when people are leaving. The state would have a permit, or I guess a license, whatever you want to call it. They're a licensee. I'm going to call it a license. They would have to get that form submitted. And then you have a layer as the city, if you're going to allow people to participate. And this is where our insurance is stepping in. What else are you going to require beyond the state form? And if you want them to have XYZ, you can have a set of rules and regs that they must have XYZ, or they submit a separate application to us so we know who's participating. We can do some of those things as well logistically.
Mayor and council, one of the things right now that we do with liquor licensing, they're required to get their state permit, but they also provide a copy to me at the city, and then we issue them an annual license as well. Just to confirm that they have received the proper license from the state, and then we have record of those licenses. Right now we charge for those things. You can charge or not charge. I mean, that's up to you to make that decision, but that's another way to track who has them. And then that way we provide that information to public safety, so they also know who is in town and serving.
One other thing I'd just like to comment is all of our businesses that do serve alcohol. In my early days in college, I was a cocktail waitress, and we had to go through a lot of extensive training on what we could and couldn't do, when we should shut someone down, what liabilities we had. All of these businesses, if I'm correct, Shane, have this knowledge. So you're not just giving it to somebody who doesn't know. You have also faith that these businesses, they're responsible for this anyway. This is part of their responsibility. So this is just something that they know they're responsible for and know how to make those things work.
Jamie, has any of the businesses checked to see what kind of costs they might incur for additional liability insurance to give us an idea, how much of a burden it might be on them?
Yeah, we haven't really yet, because we're kind of waiting to see with the state. But usually, I think the liability insurance that the building owner, business owner has, if anything, like with what Go Augusta does, if we have an event downtown, we have to mark the city as liable, or as, what's it called, Josh?
Additional insurance.
Yes. So I don't know if that costs us extra. We do it that, I don't know that it does. I don't know if it would cost extra for the others. I know Shane is looking into that. But that's kind of where we're at. We're waiting to see what the insurance company says. And that's where it's kind of been the problem is, we want to make sure we get it right, but they've never dealt with it before. So they're kind of in the same boat as, we've got to figure this out because there's going to be others. So,
Okay.
yeah.
I know in my business, to name an additional insured cost, $100 or $150 a year more.
Okay.
So I don't know. That was 20
Yeah.
years ago, 15 years ago.
Yeah. I honestly don't know. I just pay it. So, but we will look into that. Yes. Or are looking into it.
Josh, this may be more of a question for you, but under the proposed ordinance, Number, let's see, it's 3, compliance, maybe it's G3. It makes reference to the licensees within the CCA. It says shall be liable for violations of all liquor laws governing the sale and consumption of alcoholic liquor or still malt beverage that occur on the licensee's premises.
Mhm.
Now, is that inside or is that also outside of the CCA?
No, it's whatever their license premises according to their licenses with the state.
Responsible for what goes on outside their premises.
This is the nature of that conversation with insurance. So this section right here is almost verbatim from the state statute and the state form. It says the licensee is responsible on the licensee's premises. But then what ABC will tell you is that the cup originated for them, the liability follows the cup. That's what ABC told me. So when I asked ABC, is should the city be concerned? And again, they're not insurance carriers. They're the state agency that licenses. They said, well, the liability is with the server of the alcohol. So that doesn't change when they leave the premises. But our insurance carrier has a concern about it that seems to be different than what ABC has, and they want a bunch of layers of protection. And the concern being that, okay, if it isn't fully the licensee responsible once they leave the common consumption area, well, who has the deep pockets in that circumstance? So let's say something goes wrong or there is an accident, who's more likely to be sued? Is it the city or is it going to be that server of the alcohol? That's where their concern comes from. It says, here's the layers we want you to have. And that's what we're still working through.
Well, if this ordinance is just basically a city ordinance, the wording that's in it, we draft the wording that we want. So why couldn't we make them also responsible for the acts that are in the CCA area if it involves their cup?
So that's an attorney question. I don't know that I can answer it, but what I would
That's what-
say
That's what
is,
state law says.
yeah, what I would say is this language is straight from the statute. And the statute stops where it says licensee's premises.
Well, then
And it
that's,
says the common consumption permit holder is responsible for violations in the permit area. We would be the permit holder in the common
okay,
consumption.
well, then that brings me up to another item on number F, under conduct. We talked about any person acting in a way that violates any provisions of the municipal code, state or federal laws, including but not limited to any offenses against person, property, the public peace, the public safety, or public morals will be removed from the CCA. Doesn't say by whom. Does the city do that, or do the permit holders do that?
Well, we are the only permit holder. The licensees are the businesses.
So that would
are
be up to our
participating.
safety department to be removing those people.
Yes.
And I think we had a discussion here several weeks ago that our safety department said they're too busy. They're not going to be doing this.
Well, it would be our safety department if someone leaves a bar and is stumbling down the sidewalk anyway, whether that CCA exists or not.
Okay.
So the question is, does this actually change that circumstance?
Well,
enough
I was
where
also
it's-
wondering if
Right.
if the safety department finds some minor in possession of a cup from a business that has alcohol in it,
Mhm.
is the licensee responsible for that, or as though they had served them?
I think this all goes back to just the standard.
Do you speak to
What's
that?
any different than that happening now?
Liquor store.
Right.
Well, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Now, if, you know, if a
what I would
kid, if a
imagine-
kid was in a business where liquor is sold, I think that's a little more controllable.
That's different. It's easier to prove if they're in a business. Now, if there's a minor out on the street we find with one, the minor gets the ticket. It's no different than if we find a minor driving with alcohol or walking down the street or at a party with alcohol at a private residence. But we still have a burden of proof if we're going to tag a business for selling to minors, and we'd have to catch them doing that first. But that's not saying somebody didn't walk outside and hand a minor. And if we see that, then that individual person is, he gets tagged with the fine on that one.
But that exists right now if anyone
That's no
handed
different than
alcohol
it is
to a
right now.
minor.
Correct.
Whether
That
CCA
won't change a
exists or not.
thing. And as business, yeah, we don't have enough staff to assign people down there. You're right. But now we take calls as they come in. So that would not change.
In one of the towns that was mentioned in Georgia, alluded to creating more trash. Have you taken that into account, that who's going to police and clean that up each weekend, or?
Yeah, I don't think that it's going to be a problem. If you haven't been to the depot on any morning before I pick up the trash, I don't think that's necessarily going to be the cause of it. And, that's something that Augusta has been working on anyway, is volunteer crews to be able to clean up, because people are messy. That's just kind of standard, but that's where I'd like to talk to the point of, you're talking about who's going to be monitoring this. We have an amazing group of business owners that work together very well downtown. And if somebody sees something, best believe they're going to say something. We will take care of it. Not to say we're going to take care of specifically somebody in violating anything. Of course, we would call the safety department. But if somebody's trying to leave a particular area and we know what's going on with that, we'll make sure and stop it, because this is a vested interest for the business owners to make something more happen in our city. So they've all agreed, like, yeah, we'll also keep an eye out for this. We don't want people to do the wrong thing. That's not what we want to do. So I think just having that great business alliance will be a big benefit in those issues.
Okay, one more question, and I'm through for tonight. Do you view this as being something as a positive or a negative for the annual car show that's held?
I will not comment on the car show. It is not one of my events.
Okay.
So I guess the way I would answer it is the common consumption area is not designed around any specific event. But if you're going to have an event where consumption is occurring, it needs to comply with rules and regulations that you have established. So the governing body has the ability to require special event permits, or to have special event permits done for circumstances that are going to be different than how the CCA generally functions. I think whatever you choose to do with any specific event should be handled in that way, and you establish your guidelines based on that event's specific approval, whatever you're going to require of any entity participating. That's the way I would answer that.
Jamie, you said
Yes.
earlier that it's not in Wichita, the common.
They do have it for Oktoberfest, but no, it's not in Wichita.
Is there a
Oktoberfest
reason
is the
for
only
that?
event.
Is
I'm
there
sorry?
a reason for it, or?
Typically, size of the city is what matters. Because like for example, Emporia, Kansas has it. They pay a lot more just because they have their large events that bring in thousands and thousands of people. Typically our events are, under 1,000, and usually in the, 300 to 500 mark. Most of the time it's a benefit for the smaller cities, because that's a way to get people into your downtown and from outside of your city. The bigger cities, they're not concerned with that kind of, business bringing in for economic development. So most of them are, around our size, maybe a little bit larger. Emporia, I think, is probably one of the largest, Wellington being the closest to us, that does currently have the common consumption law. But they don't utilize it yet.
Anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, on this boundary that's shown in here, why does it not stop at this alleyway? Why does it go clear to this school street?
So it does actually, I believe, Josh, specify in the listing that it does stop at the alleyway.
Well, that's what he said, but that's
Kansas
not what it
Main
shows
Street, that map is actually the Kansas Main Street, or the Augusta Main Street, downtown Augusta Inc. Boundary line. So we utilize the boundaries primarily, but then as far as for the map, but in the descriptions, it will stop. We're going to make it stop at the alleyways. So
Okay.
there's going to be a sign either painted or I don't remember what they're called, but it's like a giant sticker that will say, you can't go past this point, and include that before the alleyways. So, if some point down the road, there's a business that comes in maybe around the corner on the backside, there's always options for the future, but it's primarily just to the businesses. So we're going to have it say stop here.
So
Okay.
Bob, the map was created when they did their initial proposal a couple of months ago. So over the course of our back and forth discussions, when we decided to not include those alleyways, that's where the narrative boundary came from, even though it mainly resembles the main street. So when we actually do our final signage, we'll want to create a new map that actually shows that.
I'm just
boundary.
making sure because it
Yes.
says right here, it's proposed
Absolutely.
It says right on it.
Yeah.
Now, another thing I want to say is, as far as we going after kids and everything, and then this counterproductive, I don't see that myself. If we wanting to bring in and grow, we have to go after adults too. It's great that we do stuff for the kids. It's wonderful. But the kids aren't going to say, hey, let's go run to Augusta and buy a hamburger at Shane's, and maybe we'll get a drink and walk around and see what else they have. Adults will. Adults, kids aren't going to say, hey, let's go to Trick or Treat Street in Augusta. Adults might do that if they know that they can go get something to drink afterwards. That's my opinion. I do have a question for some of the businessmen here, though. When they talked about doing it, giving it on the sidewalk, selling beer and stuff on the sidewalk, wouldn't you want them to come into your business? Or is that something you guys would be interested in selling the beer on the sidewalk? Or, I mean, maybe if we really grew on this and really made it a
Well, and I
big
don't
time
know,
come here, but
does that have to do with like the catering license? Would that have anything? That's
The
a separate issue,
catering is
right?
something separate. Yeah, the
Okay.
statute just has a section that applies to that non-contiguous sales. And I don't know what a good example would be. I haven't come up with one, but like I have a vision in my head of it. Presumably folks have traveled enough. You've seen some downtowns that have much more of like a cafe type environment on some of their streets where the restaurants really do extend out onto the streets themselves. And you have basically anything that you serve in a restaurant is happening out on the street. I wonder if maybe it has a component like that. But I mean, in those circumstances, I can think of in other cities, like you still have a boundary generally for where the restaurant is. But like I remember going to Boston, I remember going to other large cities where the restaurant just spills onto the street and you have all of this street level pedestrian activity. So maybe something like that.
I was just
Our brick and
wondering.
mortars are really compartmentalized, so I don't know if that would ever really occur here, but it could. I mean, you could try to develop and have more activity on the sidewalks that way. I don't have a good example of it.
Yeah. I was just wondering if that was something that they'd be in, because to me, it doesn't sound like it'd be interesting at all if I was owning a business downtown selling alcohol. I'd want them to come in and say, well, I'm in here. I'm gonna go get something to eat too. That's all I got.
Anybody else?
I just want to, I think it's a good concept. I think there's some areas of, especially enforcement.
Mhm.
I mean, if I'm walking around downtown with this cup, who's going to know if it's full of water or full of Jack Daniels?
Do you know what's in my cup in my bag right now?
I don't.
Exactly.
So
And that's the thing is-
who's going to police that?
Nope. But who does that now? That's kind of the thing is yes, I agree with you because you see that happen all the time. But there's nothing really you can do about it. We're not promoting it that way. They're not going to be able to bring down a cup. They're not going to be able to take in anything besides this cup that you get from XYZ. It's going to have their logo, their date and time. That's all you get. You walk around downtown with a cup or you try and go into another store with a cup, it's not happening. It's not going to be allowed.
Or I take my XYZ cup and
Uh-huh.
go to the trunk of my car and refill it.
What stops you from doing that now?
I think that's the thing is,
City ordinance does.
Well, that doesn't stop me from doing it. I'm just kidding. But the point is, there is no way to, you know what I mean? And I understand that's a valid concern, but surprisingly, people do that all the time into places they really shouldn't. But you also can't take that cup into Sugar Shane's, and you're not going to be able to take that cup into Marketplace. That's not going to be allowed, period. However, if Tanya says, okay, I allow common consumption cups, you can take that cup into Tanya's place at that point in time. Again, there's no good answer for it. It's
No,
kind of a
there's-
tale as old
what
as
if it-
time. So,
What if it to death? But you can what if it to death, but
Yeah.
at the same time, we got to make sure it's workable when we start it, so it don't fail because of something we left out or didn't think.
absolutely. No, I agree. And that's what's hard is there's no good answer for that because there's no one in the world that's been able to kind of figure that out yet that I've heard of. So unfortunately, maybe we can be the first.
Does beer sales have anything to play into this? I mean,
Beer sales was actually not in the research that I did. Beer sales and alcohol sales were up, but not significant. The amount of retail sales were anywhere from 30 to 400%. And that's really what we're going for. It's not the alcohol sales, but the option. I'm not going to go buy 5 glasses of wine, but I might buy a glass of wine and walk around to the different stores. So surprisingly enough, in the study shown, the alcohol sales were up, but not a significant amount.
I think one little point in there was one that says talking about busting a myth. It says the rest have gone, I'm sorry. It says the rest have gone down from 2.25 per month to 1.25 per month in this, whatever place it was at.
Uh-huh.
I think that's pretty interesting fact to note too.
On the incidences of drinking going down.
Yeah, the alcohol
Or the,
ordinance,
the arrests.
alcohol-related arrest.
Right. And I believe
So-
that was one of the larger of the small towns in Georgia that did that. And it was more focused on people were there to do something. You have more visitation coming in than your typical Saturday night crowd. And then that spills into the street after hours, that kind of thing. I think a lot of people, and I can't guarantee it was this one, but one of the locations where people were much more adamant on keeping eyes out and making sure that things were happening how they should, and people were aware of that. I apologize. I can't guarantee that was the same town, but that was one of the issues was that the community was kind of keeping an eye out to keep it going.
And I think that's something that Augusta has going for it. When we find something that we like, and we do keep an eye out for it and make sure it's done right, so we can keep it.
Any other questions? Well, if you do, you know how to get a hold of me, but thank you all for your consideration.
So Mayor and Council, just real quick, as I plan on bringing this back at the next meeting, is there anything that you want me to work on with the verbiage you have in front of you tonight?
Doesn't appear so.
Okay, so I will get clarification from the insurance provider. I do think that the ordinance, and again, I want the attorney to review and approve the ordinance as to form as well, but having that provision that allows us to establish rules and regs with the insurance, we may not have to make a ton of modification to the ordinance itself, but you could still have layers of protection in whatever process we establish elsewhere. So this verbiage may be good to run with if you have nothing else to change, but I will verify with our carrier what they would like to see and have those recommendations presented to you for consideration.
With that, I would say we should adjourn for a 10-minute break.
I'll make a motion, take a 10-minute break, return at 8:55.
Second the motion.
Got a motion and a second to take a 10-minute break and return at
8:55.
8:55.
Mr. Brown, make a motion, to return back to our regular session meeting.
Second motion.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to return to our works or our session. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We're on item 3 now, KPP Energy Pace Loan Letter of Interest for Solar Installations. Staff?
Yes, Mayor and Council, I think I'm just going to go ahead and invite our Public Utilities Director, Tim Johnson, up here to help explain some of this. I'll give you a basic background, but he has been working in detail with KPP and will be able to answer any more technical questions. The way I understand it, in the coming years, as you know, we are part of the power pool and we have a diversity of power in our portfolio. And there's a gap that's going to be coming up in the next couple of years and trying to cover our needs until a brand new plant that we've been working on in Winfield is going to be ready to go. And so they've been exploring ways of covering that gap. And one of the ideas has been solar farms. And so I guess with that bit of introduction, turn it over to Tim to explain I don't know if it's a grant, but it's a program we're going after and how this works with the various cities that are given an opportunity to participate.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council, Tim Johnson, Public Utilities Director. I also serve on the KPP Energy Board of Directors. A little bit of background on KPP. KPP is a joint action agency. It's a group of 24 city electric utilities who pool their resources, sell all of their energy to KPP and buy all of their energy from KPP. This is done to keep energy costs down. The members of KPP who generate energy use rather small and inefficient electrical generation facilities. They cost more to run. To run them full time would be cost prohibitive. You would have the most expensive electricity in the region if you depended on your power plant all the time for your energy. And in fact, we do not have enough generating capacity in Augusta to supply all of the electricity we need on hot summer days. So many years ago, Augusta joined with a number of other cities. Mulvane, Wellington, and Winfield are 3 of those that are in our neighborhood to form what is now called KPP Energy. KPP Energy buys its electricity through a number of purchase power contracts with large energy producers. One of those energy producers was Jeffrey Energy Center up in the northeastern part of the state. Jeffrey Energy Center is a coal-fired plant, the worst of the worst when it comes to electrical generation. KPP Energy had a contract to purchase energy from Jeffrey that expired last year, and KPP chose not to renew it. We knew that that was coming. We chose not to renew it, and for the past 4 or 5 years have been in the process of developing a newer, cleaner source of energy for our portfolio. KPP's energy portfolio is somewhere in the neighborhood of 250 megawatts overall. Giving up that contract for Jeffrey reduced our portfolio by 59 megawatts. Now, electric demand isn't going down. It isn't even staying the same. I was reading an article just a short time ago saying that implied that we may need as much as 35% more electricity in this country by 2030. We are not building generation fast enough as a country to keep up with the increasing demand. And in KPP's case, we gave up a dirty, very expensive portion of our electric portfolio, the Jeffrey Energy Center contract. And while we have time to get to the point where this new energy source, which will be the energy center that is being built in Winfield, we nonetheless need to expand that portfolio beyond that. One of the things that we're getting pressure on is the type of energy in our portfolio. We're about 15 to 20%, depending on the weather, renewable energy. Most of that is wind. Vast majority of it is wind. A little bit of it is hydro power out of Oklahoma. The biggest chunk is natural gas. Whether it's the smaller generating facilities like ours and wind fields, or, well, not so much wind fields, there's steam, I believe, but Wellington, or some larger sources. Most of the biggest chunk is gas. What we need to look at in terms of what the bond rating companies, bankers, and society in general is demanding from us is more clean energy. We are about tapped out on wind energy because of when it's available versus when we have demand for energy. Wind energy is not a good source of energy on a hot summer afternoon. The winds don't blow then. They don't generate enough energy. They generate energy at night, in the early morning. We need to begin to develop more daytime renewable energy sources. And in this part of the world, that's solar. The federal government last year made available billions of dollars in loans and in some grants for the development of new clean energy resources. KPP Energy and the other big joint action agency in the state of Kansas, Kansas Municipal Energy Agency, of which you are a member as well, partnered in an application for a loan, a low interest loan that's partially forgivable from the USDA in the amount of about $100 million. The initial application was approved, and we've now been asked to submit a final application. Things look good. Now, why Augusta? Augusta is one of 9 cities who are members of KPP Energy who have enough of a base load, meaning on a cool autumn night, our base load is about 5 megawatts. All right. That it makes it financially viable to put in a solar array, not that would feed electricity directly into our grid, but would be sold on the larger grid and would be a source of revenue for KPP and would improve the mix of the portfolio of energy resources for KPP. KPP is looking at about 20 megawatts of solar spread out over 9 cities. Augusta is one of those 9 cities, and they're looking at somewhere between 3 and 5 megawatts of solar. Should you all choose to participate in this exercise, what they are asking of Augusta is, does the city have land that it controls that it could contribute to this project? Anything else would be negotiated, including how that contribution occurs, what the responsibilities of KPP are, what the responsibilities of the city are, what sources of cost and benefit would be. They're not asking for a clearly defined answer to that tonight. What they're asking for is essentially your interest or not in participating in this program. The utility itself, the solar fields itself, would be owned by KPP. It would be operated and maintained by KPP, with the possible exception of some small, we're the ones here, we can see that it needs to be mowed, trimmed, gates need to be closed, whatnot. Maintenance, but the maintenance of the panels themselves would be outsourced to an organization who does that nationwide. It would be a KPP responsibility. The location that we're looking at right now is the field immediately south of the wastewater plant, as well as the field immediately west of the railroad tracks there. The two combined are about 18 acres. We do not know if all of that is developable. We don't know that until and unless the governing body decides to say, yes, KPP, you go forth and do the research, do the due diligence, come back to us and see what can be done, if anything can be done there. And then we will move forward with memorializing an agreement between the two organizations. That's a lot to unpack, so I'll stop right there and respond to any questions you may have.
Where does the city of Augusta benefit from this dollar wise? You know, is there rent that we would collect for using these areas, or what else would we benefit from this?
KPP's council, general counsel, is of the opinion that rent may not be the way to go in order to receive a direct benefit from this, but rather an adjustment to our electric rates in lieu of rent that would equal that.
But compensation.
Yes, yeah.
So
There are some tax implications there that
Yeah.
make a rate adjustment more attractive. They think, both for the city and for KPP.
So that's a direct impact. One of the roundabout ways, and this speaks to the project generally, not just specifically Augusta's participation, is when I spoke with Brooke Carroll about it, one of the things that sounded like piqued KPP's interest is, at least based on their modeling, it's expected that the cost, the per kilowatt hour, the charge for solar to the members is cheaper than most anything they're going to find on the open market if they have to fill that gap with another source. So that's kind of the long-term implication based on their modeling. The short term is, what is our specific relationship on the land? And
Yeah, to be clear, everybody's electric rate would be marginally reduced because KPP is buying electricity a little bit less. But for those cities who participate, they're also being compensated through their rates for the use of that land.
Now, speaking of the use of the land, and I'm going to tie this back into wind farms. What's the life expectancy of a solar farm?
They're amortized at 20 to 30 years.
Okay.
That's amortized. That doesn't mean they don't last 40 to 50, but all photovoltaic cells, whether it's on the roof of your house or they're the big industrial ones like this, lose some ability to generate over time. And one of the things that, one of the questions I've asked about this sitting in these board meetings is, should we, I believe we should, factor in entire life cycle costs of this project, not just the initial capital or even O&M costs, but what's it going to take to either replace or shut down this in the future and return the land to its post-utility or pre-utility state.
That was my next question, because I know in some of these wind farm contracts, landowners didn't realize what they signed, and they find out years down the road, they're responsible for that wind tower out there on their property, or wind towers, and they're going to be the ones that have to figure out how to tear it down and stuff. It's not the company that put them out there. And I was just wanting to make sure, we didn't get caught in a deal like that too.
I've been involved in board discussions throughout this project since the idea first percolated, and at least at this point in time, there doesn't seem to be any desire on the part of the board members to enter into 9 contracts with 9 cities that are all exactly the same. All right. So as a board, we want to hear what each individual community has to say and what they feel they need or want in that agreement. And we may have somewhat different agreements from one community to the next.
Now, do we have a time limit on making a decision about having them look at this location, whether it's viable or not?
It would be best if you made that decision tonight. That doesn't commit you to anything except letting them bring in their consultant to
Okay.
look at this, to look at the zoning, the drainage. You're familiar with this land. You know, some, if not all of it is in floodplain.
Right.
All right. And there are plenty of solar facilities that are, but that increases costs and technology has to be modified, et cetera, et cetera. And if it's not a financially viable project for Augusta, KPP won't do it. But they really need to bring in their consultant to look at the ground, look at the records, look at the zoning and all that before they make it a yes or no, this is a good site for solar. And then if it is, they'll include that in the final application to USDA. So we have 9 initial participants, members, but that could get narrowed down to 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. We don't know until we evaluate those sites.
Well, if no more commitment there is to what you're just bringing up, Tim, I don't see where we're at anything by letting them look at this and see whether or not it's viable.
I believe you're correct.
There's not a charge to that or?
No.
And just for the people at home or in the audience, they're going to ask this question, why aren't we looking at the refinery property? And the answer is, 1, we don't own the refinery property. And 2, the owner of that property is Williams Energy Company, and they are more than likely looking at privatization of a solar farm on their property. And they will own it and they will sell that back. So that, just so everybody knows that that's already been considered, and that's the answer.
Were there any future expectations of building our sewer plant bigger to the south
No.
for future references or anything like that?
The site is designed for expansion on the existing site now. And we're decades away from needing to expand at that level too.
Yeah, capacity wise, I think that your best investment would be into the sewer lines for I&I. Because one of the things that we observed once we did Basin A on the sewer lines is we had an estimated like 20% reduction in flows that were going down to the plant to be treated. And so one of your ways, rather than just raw expansion of the plant itself to mitigate those capacity needs, is to improve the lines so that only water flushed is making it down there and not rainwater. And that, so you have the capacity through adding other clarifiers and things like that to expand, but you also have the ability to enhance your capacity by improving the lines themselves. And right now, you got a significant amount of capacity left in that plant.
Building on that, on your comment, Josh, you can see on page 6 of my director's report, under the wastewater heading, that we had, even though we were comparing a 3-week to a 2-week reporting period in that report, we nonetheless, on a daily average inflow, we treated 17% more per day for this past 3 weeks than we did for the prior 2 weeks. And that is because of those rains we had that week.
Quick question for you, Tim. Do we have, when they do these studies, are they going to be looking at, or can they give us any kind of indication what we can expect as a city to what we can even pass back down to our consumers or our customers in the city, rather than saying, there's a chance we're going to reduce your rates or something, but are you going to get a nickel a year or something? Is that something, is that something I won't even go through, that type of deal?
You may get a talking point out of that. I don't have that in front of me, but what we were presented with as a board at our last meeting on this subject, right, one before last actually, was a kilowatt per hour cost for this energy versus a kilowatt per hour cost for all the other energy KPP is buying and selling. And this is substantially smaller. But so I don't want to use numbers because then they become expectations.
Right.
But it's a good 50% less per kilowatt hour than what we're currently paying. But this, for instance, in overall, the maximum amount of megawatts KPP is going to build is 20 megawatts. All right. KPP's inventory, it's on paper, energy inventory is somewhere in the neighborhood of 240 to 250 megawatts. So while the cost per megawatt for the solar may be much lower, it's just a small portion of the overall energy portfolio that we have. Having said that, it's a whole lot less expensive than what we gave up for that Jeffrey energy contract with the coal-fired plant. That was our most expensive source of electricity at KPP. So the answer was a very gray fudgy answer. I'm sorry, but it might be an incremental decrease in the increase of electricity over time, but that's better than
Not at all.
the status quo ante. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to make a motion for approval of submission of a letter of support designating the city of Augusta's intention to participate in KPP energy solar project subject to conditions, including availability of suitable land for development of a small solar farm.
Second it.
Got a motion and a second. Any other questions, discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Since we have the next thing, can we go ahead and, I'm gonna go ahead and make a motion to appoint Director of Public Utilities Tim Johnson as the city's voting delegate, and Electric Production Superintendent Jim Sutton as the alternate voting delegate at the annual membership committee meeting of the Kansas Power Pool, as we do annually.
Second the motion.
Got a motion and a couple seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay. We're going to go to the next item here is the Charter Ordinance number 20 petition. And I would just like to start the discussion here that saying that I think we should acknowledge that the protest petition against the proposed charter ordinance was successful and have a motion and a vote to officially suspend it. And that's really all that I have to say about that at this point.
And I'll make that a motion.
Second it.
Got a motion and a second
What is the motion?
to officially suspend the charter ordinance.
And what does that mean when you suspend it?
It's dead.
It's dead.
Yeah, so the way I would read that, Mayor, is the option number 2 up here to just withdraw the charter ordinance from consideration.
Yep.
And can that be done?
Yes.
Yeah.
Who made the second?
Yeah,
I
so
You did, okay.
the way the charter ordinance is set up is it can, once you're in receipt of a valid petition, which we are, the only way for it to proceed to actually be adopted is for the electorate to vote on it and to pass it by majority vote. So if you don't submit it to the electorate, it'll eventually just die because you haven't taken the action to actually pass it. That's essentially what option 1 says. Option 2 says, make that more definitive. Don't leave anything hanging and just make an affirmative motion that we aren't planning on putting it to a vote and you're withdrawing it.
Okay.
So that's,
I would just like to ask one more thing. What is the basic law that says you can just withdraw it? Where does that come from? Or suspend it? I think that's the term that the motion was.
So the Kansas Constitution is what governs whether a charter ordinance becomes law or not. And under that constitutional provision, it says that words to the effect that an election, if called, shall be held within 30 days of the filing of the petition, and an election held within 90 days. So if the governing body chooses not to call an election, then the charter ordinance just does not become law.
Right, but that doesn't address this motion, does it?
So maybe I can state it another way for you. If you just want to make an affirmative statement that the governing body is not putting it to an election, you can
Okay.
just motion for that.
Okay.
If that brings clarity, then we're not.
I think that would be
Then we're
more
not parsing
clear.
words.
Yes.
Yeah, then we're not parsing words.
Motion to read that way. How did you say that?
So are you okay with that motion being amended to read
Yes.
that way?
Can you read that back to what it is or whatever? Do we know what that is?
So
That ends up.
the motion, I guess the motion and vote, let's see. I move for the governing body of the city of Augusta not to put charter ordinance number 20 to the public vote or
Correct.
to an election.
Okay.
So moved or changed or altered or.
Which in effect kills it. So
Do a public vote, is that what it is?
I second it.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Is everybody clear on that now? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So that moves us down to matters for and from the council. And I have an item here. Well, I've got several items. First one is the museum has contacted me and they requested 50 bricks.
500.
Says 500.
500, yeah.
okay.
The historical museum. They want to place them just north of the wrought iron fence in a kind of a sidewalk fashion and use that to display some of the outside displays they have so that it acts kind of like a sidewalk for them.
Is it just in this lot somewhere or
Right there,
right in here?
Right. Right against that wrought iron fence.
Right there.
And that was the request.
So
Staff.
Mayor Rollins contacted me about it and I told him that I would feel most comfortable if the decision was made by council. So years ago, we actually had a process where we were selling excess brick inventory from our streets that we had. Once we got down to a certain number, which was about 10,000, we stopped selling them to the public. And I think we're somewhere in the 9,500 to 10,000 brick range, which is our inventory for patching or anything that we do there. So there's that component that we stopped selling them. So if any are going to be given away, then I would want that to be a governing body that authorizes it. And two, if it's not being sold and it's a donation or a gift, I would want the governing body to sign off on that as well. So it seems rather benign, but given those set of circumstances, I felt more comfortable with the governing body making that decision.
I would think it'd be a good idea to give them to the museum, but I want to make sure that it's not going to affect our ability by the city to have a store of bricks on hand to make necessary repairs if we need them.
Still have 9,000 plus
Okay.
after the donation.
And so it's your judgment that that's plenty to keep on hand?
We would survive. Yeah.
Okay. Then I would move for the adoption to give or a motion to give the museum 500 of the bricks that we have in storage for the Brick Street.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any other questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Then I was asked by Jamie Chapin of Go Augusta to remind people that Saturday, November 25th, there's a small business cookie crawl going to take place downtown. And you can go to Augusta's website and check all of that out. There's also a parade November 28th at 6 p.m. and it's called the Lighted Christmas Parade. And go to their website, and there's even a QR code on their website that you can scan to learn more about it. And so you could sign up to participate in that. And then the Play Park fundraiser on December 3rd is going to have a home tour, Christmas home tour, Christmas house home tour. And there's 4 houses. And there'll be like cookies and hot chocolate or apple cider at those places. And tickets are $50 per person because it's a fundraiser for the play park. And the tickets are available at Tanya's store. Are they anywhere else other than the marketplace? I know I have 10 at my house that I forgot to bring tonight. If anybody wants them, they could contact me or preferably go to the marketplace and pick them up down there.
How are we gonna make sure people don't bring in their own cookies?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, common consumption. No, bring your own bottle either. And that is it for me. So, Mr. Huddleston, do you have anything else to add?
Nothing this evening, Mayor.
Okay, Eric?
Nothing, Mr. Mayor.
I just want to mention again that last meeting I brought up the crosswalk on Ohio, and we did get kind of beat up on that in the last week or so about near misses on that crosswalk. I would just like to see if there's anything we can do to speed up study up, or who's in charge of that study, or
Short answer is no, but it's coming in the near future. Now, even once the study is done, you still have to come up with funding and decide if you're going to fund that whole project. I have heard a preliminary summary of what they would propose as a solution. And it will be quite a bit more costly than just putting a crossing back in at that location. But I do think it sounds like a much better solution than putting that crossing in. But I don't want to get out ahead of the study because what they told me is their final recommendation might change. So for now, I think if you can just let it ride for a couple of weeks, hopefully get that study resolved, and then we can propose what I hope is a more permanent solution that kind of covers that whole corridor area. And what I would say is we do have funding left over for street improvements. I think that you could loop that in that street improvement package and get it done in short order. But I can't tell you what the full scope of that project is yet. But based on what they told me, I do expect it'll be done in the next few weeks, but they've also told me that a couple of times now and pushed it back. So I'm calling them to get it to move as quick as I can, but we're not in control of it. It's a state study.
And we continue to have problems with the, traffic light at Belmont in Ohio. I would like to see if there's any way that we can find money to at least fix that traffic light and maybe the crosswalk, whatever that plan says. We ought to have a lot of money left over in that $700,000 for street repairs that was allocated for the dam project. And if there's any way that, just as a suggestion, that we could use some of that money to once and for all fix that traffic light, separate from the downtown 7th Street traffic lights, just make that a separate project and get that thing fixed and put to bed.
So we made an adjustment after that last round of complaints came in, and I'd be curious if anyone has had issues with it in the last few days.
But look at the history of that light. Twice in the last 3 months, we've had to put a 4-way stop sign up in the middle of the night because it's quit.
Well, and I don't know if that's specific to that light or not, or if there's bigger issues when
We
that
need to
happens,
find out
but-
and we need to get it fixed,
Okay,
in
well,
my opinion.
Again, that was in the bond issue package, the charter ordinance, all of that stuff. It's in that grouping of things. Now, staff did go out recently and change the timing on that light again that prioritizes the north-south traffic on Ohio Street. So my curiosity is, after we made that adjustment, have you received any complaints in the last couple of days about it?
No.
So now,
it's just a-
now we need to
The
make
history
sure.
says it's just a matter of time until we do.
Well,
it.
and that's possible. And so I'm not disagreeing with doing upgrades and making sure all those intersections are functioning appropriately. I'm just saying a change was made, and I'm curious if you've heard anything since that change was made. And if not, that's the solution for now until it gets upgraded. Now, in terms of the funding, whatever solutions you do on Ohio Street, that study is going to involve traffic signals. And I don't know, this is just my take. I'd like attorney and other folks to weigh in. Not going to be able to do it tonight, but the street sales tax, the way that it was voted on, I think has flexibility where you can do sidewalks because of the way that the state defines streets. You can do maintenance on streets. I don't know if that would be an allowable use of the funds to put in, say, $100,000 traffic signal. I don't know. And if I can get an opinion on that, we'll go back and see how that original sales tax ballot measure was done, because it's not general fund, it's not general capital improvement sales tax. That is the street maintenance sales tax. And so I don't know if that's an allowable use for signals, but it might be. I just have to check on that.
That's all I got.
Okay, Kip?
Back on the play park thing, I know that a week and a half ago, they had raised up through funds and donations, $165,000.
It's up to 215 now is the last number I
Awesome,
heard.
awesome. But there's a thermometer sign that's been put up down there at Play Park Point and stuff, so you can kind of keep an eye on that, see how it's rising and stuff. So they're doing great, going to the 300,000 or 350,000. My next thing is I just wanted to say thank you to everyone in our community, the people that work for our community and things and all of our veterans. This weekend's Veterans Day, as we look back and remember all the things that have occurred over the years and things to help make the freedoms that we have today that we get to enjoy. And the last thing that I have is please everyone go out and vote tomorrow.
Okay, Bob?
Nothing, Mr. Mayor.
Tom?
I got two things. First is I want to compliment the Augusta Safety Department and the Sheriff's Department. If you notice on Facebook now, they are putting on their activities that are taking place on a daily basis and let you know a little bit more about what's going on in your community and stuff. And I think it's a great idea, Chief. Second thing is I approached Josh about this and he got a hold, and Chuck was kind enough to come tonight. There's been a lot of questions about the completion of the riprap on the dam. And I'd like Chuck to get up here and give us a little bit of an update. It's a finished project now, but there's people saying there's not enough riprap. It didn't go low enough. It didn't go high enough. So can you take us from there, Chuck?
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and I will try. The issue with the dam to start out with was you had the original dam structure. Is that our set of plans, Josh?
Yeah, this is from the original work session when we met with council
Okay.
and talked through the different designs. And so
Okay.
I think that the cross section is the same as what you ended up
Yeah.
using, but
So I'm going to try to back up a little bit and explain what the existing condition was out there. You had the original dam that was built, the structural part of the dam. Then in early 2012,
Yeah.
there was an additional berm built on front of the dam. And that was to provide erosion protection, and wasn't in itself is not a structural component of the dam. That's also when the spillway was changed. the wave action had started eroding that berm, and that erosion had got eaten far enough back in, it had started eroding in places back into the original dam structure and slopes that were there. So the project was undertaken. Once that structure started having erosion, that's when KDA gets concerned and says, hey, this could be a safety issue. So the intent is to protect that original structure of the dam. So based on our survey and stuff, and Josh, if you want to go back to that drawing you had up, this was the concept and what we developed our design based on. We basically rebuilt the original slope of the dam. It had places that were eroded down there before the trench you see. Rebuilt that to its original slope. Cut down, generally that berm was at an elevation of 1256.5. We cut down an additional 3 feet and built what we call the toe wall, which is that trench filled with rock. And then came back up to the existing ground there at about 56.5. Now that elevation varies as you go across the dam, depending on the existing conditions, but this is a typical of it. So then we looked at the normal pool of the lake based on the weir spillway overflow topping. Determined based on wind action, expected wave heights and stuff to protect against, which amounted to another 2 feet of protection above that spillway height. And then we went I was trying to read the numbers there. That would be up to that 60.5. And then we went ahead and covered with riprap up another 1.5 feet higher than that. So the project got built as we had it designed. Basically, you've got at normal water pool level, which is equal to the top of the concrete spillway weir, you've got basically 5 foot of rock below that level, and I think here 3.5 foot above that level, as was designed. In actuality, when we got it all surveyed, got it laid out for construction, in most places, we're actually about 6 foot down to the bottom of that trench from the weir height. And the top of it varies from that 3.5 to almost 4 feet above that level. So the area we're trying to protect, and what we're trying to protect, is the structural part of the dam, and we've got rock above that and below that. When the lake refills, the water level will be in the rock. It will be up on the rock that's placed there. Does that?
Well, what some citizens have called me about is it looks like it's going to be quite a few more feet before it reaches that rock. And if the purpose of the rock was to keep the wave action from working on the earthen dam, we don't know if that dam's going to be up to, water level is going to be up next year, 2 years, 5 years. So let's say it comes up another 3 or 4 feet, and the wave action continues to work on the earthen part below the rock. Where does that put us then?
That earthen berm that was built on the front of the original dam was originally designed at the top where it met the dam to be 20 or a little more foot wide, and then it was sloped a little bit flatter slope than the original dam, so it actually kind of forms a wedge in there and gets a little wider as you go down. It was built with the intent that it would erode over time with wave action.
Okay.
Will it continue to erode if the water level's down 3 foot or 4 foot? Yeah, there'll be an area there that you can see where the waves have eroded. Will it erode when the water level's down 6 foot? Yeah, you'd have another shelf where that happens. But that's not affecting the structure of the dam itself. That's going to occur around the dam. The only way you could stop that would be completely drain the lake and line that berm all the way to the original bottom of the lake.
So on the dam face itself, all the dirt that's exposed now is a berm that is expected to erode some.
Is expected
Okay.
to erode some,
Okay.
yes.
I think that'll answer a lot of questions.
And if you recall, the 2012 project, essentially the solution that backs up the sacrificial part was geotextile fabric and plantings. That's what it was. And the way that the lake filled up, the plantings never really took off. I
Right.
mean, you got some initially, but then the plantings never really took off. And then it just slowly worked its way up the fabric, but there was nothing else stopping it from getting to the main structure. But as Chuck was indicating now, what you have is there's actually geotextile filter fabric on the bottom. And then you have a layer of much smaller filter rock. And then you have the big rocks that are sitting on top of it. And the earth that you're looking at up there is not the bottom of the rock, as Chuck was indicating. The rock actually goes down 3, and you said in some cases further than 3 feet, or just in the ballpark of that.
Yeah, in the
that 3
ballpark.
feet below the earthen berm. So those two things working
Good.
together.
So in your diagram there is the earth that we're talking of at that 1256.5 level now. I mean, in our diagram, is that kind of where the dirt?
In general, yes, that is where the dirt is.
It's not above it, but it's kind of at that point.
Right. It does vary somewhat as you go in different
Sure.
places along the dam, but in general,
So
it's,
if that erodes, what's going to hold the rock in there?
it's got
I know
that,
the rock underneath it is at an angle going back.
Yeah.
But if that erodes out of there, well, will it hold or?
well, if it's got 10 feet of soil to erode back through before it ever gets to the rock.
10 feet back from that point, it's at 1256.5.
Shows 8.9 feet.
12
Yeah, it
yeah.
shows the 8 point, where the dimension, 8.9, that berm is, that was atypical, so it's in the 10-foot range
Mhm.
from the toe of that rock out to where that berm starts the steeper slope down.
When you look at it, and I know it could be an optical illusion, but when you look at it from the east, looking back to the west, that 1256.5, that point there, you can't see the deeper part. Of course,
Right.
it's down in the ground.
It's down in the
But
ground.
that 1256.5, it looks like it's right at the top of the spillway.
I
Is that an optical illusion or is it my imagination?
So what I can tell you,
I-
Mike, that you aren't alone in seeing that as well. So staff looked at that
Just
exact
asking.
same
Yeah.
thing. And we said, Chuck,
Makes
I
me
can-
wonder
can
if
you-
we have to have a
will you
spillage
please
in
go
the
out?
lake.
Yeah. We
to
said,
make
will you
our
please go
lake
out and
get
verify all
full,
those
you know?
elevation markers and make sure? 'Cause
Well, that's what I've been
saw that
hearing
same-
from
we
all
saw that same
people
illusion,
wondering.
yes.
I got calls, it was last Thursday morning, and I was out here Thursday afternoon. I had our inspector out here, we had the contractor, and I had some of our surveyors out here, and we actually went down along there and shot elevation at the toe, shot the elevation at the top, both the dirt in both places and the top of the rock in both places, because we are talking about large stones. And yes, the elevation is about the 56.5, and the spillway weir elevation is at a 59.5.
So there's
It is an optical illusion.
3 feet of difference.
Yeah. And like I say, we had intended on at least 2 feet, and it's closer to 3 feet.
Chuck, has the state been out and inspected it and approved it yet?
The state was out, what did I tell you? I said Thursday. I think I was
Last
out here
Thursday.
Friday. The state was out. They came out with the intent to look at it under construction. By the time they got out here, it was, they're down to within a day or two of wrapping things up. My understanding was they were very satisfied with what they saw and very pleased with what they saw. We still got to do a final report and certification that it was built according to our plans and specifications. Typically, we have to do a field inspection by our engineer for that, and we typically invite the state to that. They sometimes attend, they sometimes don't. I don't know yet whether they will on this, because it was basically pretty close to being done when they were down here. But yes, they were here. And the Department of Ag.
Speaking of that, Chuck, we need to compliment our local contractor, Allen's Excavating, because they done a fantastic job, and they done it in a very short amount of time too.
You're correct.
Even when there was even some rain.
Even with some rain. So they did a bang up job. They got on it, and yes, they completed the work much faster than I had ever expected it to get done. And a lot of that, they came in, and because the lake had dropped to the level it had, they came in, picture went off right now, but they originally were planning on hauling everything over to the east end of the dam and then back and forth along the dam to place the rock and do their excavation. With the lake at the level it was, they were able to bring it into the west end of the dam and actually cross, generally where you can see the access from, what is that, 2011, Josh? They were actually able to drive across in front of the spillway structure itself. And my understanding is they were, that gave them a drive in and just dump their trucks as they went, rather than dumping them, having to bring it back in here. And my understanding was they got about half of it done like that before the rain hit. So that helped them a lot.
Now, from what I've heard, I don't think we done much damage to our city streets either, did we?
I was, whatever day I was out at the end of last week, I drove around the park streets and going out, and no, I think the streets held up very well.
Good.
So,
The park road's gonna need a little love and care at some spots, but especially where they turned to go back to the north. But other than that, it was really good looking.
yeah, I would agree. There's going to be some need out there, but not what I was expecting we might have when we got done.
The way they constructed it mattered a lot, because they were driving across those roads with empty trucks for the most part, as opposed to full ones, because they were able to drive in front of the weir. So, which it's not something we had contemplated, because when it was originally designed, that was still underwater.
Well, Chuck, I appreciate you coming overnight and sitting through this whole meeting to finally get to talk at the end of it.
Well, the night's young. You got any more questions? I'll talk a while longer. No, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And thanks to all of you.
Yeah, thank you.
That's all I have, Mayor.
Okay. Jeff,
I don't have anything tonight.
Mike,
I'd like to ask one question about this parking lot over here to the south of our building. Being any action on any of the repaving on that or anything like that? Or is there a time element behind it or?
That was one of the projects rolled into the bond issue. That was tied to the charter ordinance. The charter ordinance is what was delaying that being part of it, so.
I've had a
You
few
know, as
people
we
ask-
turn the corner for those people using the utility drive up and a sign says you can turn, there is a big hole. If something, they can just go throw
Yeah,
something in that.
yeah, if there's something like that, we definitely want to get that improved at least temporarily until a bigger project happens, so I'll mention it to them.
There's a car in there.
No, I pulled it out the other day.
Okay. Okay, we need to look at special alcohol grant ad hoc committee. So we need to get 3 people to serve on that committee, and then there's another committee we'll need people to serve on. So does anybody want to volunteer for the alcohol grant committee?
What's the time frame? That's it.
We would have it done and have a recommendation to present by at least the last meeting in December, if not before that. So remember, your circumstances have changed considerably with that. You're down to about $9,000 to figure out how to award, which is not a whole lot of money. So I don't expect it'll take a long time to figure out how to do that.
Both committees have to be done by the last meeting in December.
I did it last year, so I'll do it again.
Okay.
I'll do it too.
Okay. Got Bob and Ron.
No, Eric.
Eric. Oh, Eric.
Ron do too.
I'm good with it if you guys are.
Okay, Ron. All right, that's those 3. So the utility abatement ad hoc committee needs,
Volunteer for that, Mike.
okay. Won't take long, but
I'll do it too.
Jeff and Mike, I see, okay.
Mayor Rawlings,
Mike
we actually
Martin.
need a motion to appoint those people to those committees. I've already written down the names, but I need the motions.
Okay,
I'll make a motion to appoint Bob, Eric, and Ron to the Alcohol Grant Committee.
Second.
Second it.
got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I'll make a motion to appoint Tom, Jeff, and Mike to the Utility Abatement.
Mike Martin.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Josh, did you have anything else? Okay. That concludes most of our meeting. We have 2 executive sessions we need to have.
What Shauna was asking is if we can try to get some meetings scheduled tonight with those committees, but we can talk to the committee members once we're done if you want to move on to exec sessions, or we can just email you after, either way.
Okay.
So Mayor, I'll make a motion to go into executive session for 15 minutes to discuss issues related to land use and general liability of public officers pursuant to the consultation with attorney for the public body or agency, which would be deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship justification for executive sessions under the Kansas Open Meetings Act, KSA 754319, B2, and to invite the city manager, Josh Shaw, assistant city manager, Cammie Schroff, and city attorney, Andrew Marino. The open meeting will resume in the city council chambers at 10:10.
Second motion.
Got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to exit executive session where no action was taken.
Second the motion.
Got a motion and a second to exit executive session where no action was taken. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to go back into executive session for 15 minutes to discuss issues related to potential legal liability related to the performance of a contract pursuant to the consultation with an attorney for the public body or agency which be deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship. Justification for executive sessions under the Kansas Open Meetings Act, KSA 754319. B2, and to invite in City Manager Josh Shaw, Assistant City Manager Kemi Shrove, and City Attorney Andrew Marino. The open meeting will resume in the City Council chambers at 10:26 PM.
One.
Second the motion.
And all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Mayor, make a motion to exit executive session where no action was taken.
Second it.
Got a motion and a second to exit executive session where no action was taken. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor, make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to adjourn this meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Good night.